get a full committee? Why can't we get a full committee?
Good morning. Welcome to the House Special Committee on Housing. It is 10:04, so we're going to get started. Let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So the primary purpose of today is to dot our I's and cross our T's and get some of the rest of this language down. So the first thing I'm hoping it's very hot in here already. There's no AC, so I'm hoping this is kind of a quick day. I'm probably gonna take my coat off. The first thing I'm gonna do is call on Representative Damon, who indicated she would like to bring something up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will informally say I really wish you guys would all take your coats off. So the reason I asked for a few minutes is I want some feedback on the idea of proposing legislation to make sprinklers optional in existing residential buildings that are being converted to 3 units from single-family homes with no increase in the number of bedrooms. So there doesn't appear to be a greater liability, a greater risk. There was some mention of the issue of sprinklers in, I think, 2 or 3 different speakers this spring. I have not, frankly, done the work to look back and see who said that. And more recently, the Director of Planning and Economic Development in Claremont, Nancy Merrill, who's been in that position a long time, very experienced, knowledgeable person, brought that up as a recurring issue. I think Claremont's not unique in having many of these old homes in various levels of good or inadequate condition. And there's a fair amount of interest in making them into workforce housing. And the cost of sprinklers is prohibitive on top of the additional, costs of all the work that is required. So I had not prioritized this until Nancy brought it back up last week. And I'm just looking for feedback from people on what you think, how to proceed. Clearly need to navigate through the fire marshal and see if we can come to an agreement where they don't oppose it. So that's my question. Thank you.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Damon, do you have any idea of how much a sprinkler building would cost of those sizes?
So I think that there's a lot of variation. The preliminary conversation I had with one builder, it was very anecdotal, noted that the lines, the pipes would most likely be exposed because otherwise it would really be cost prohibitive. And he said 60 to 100,000, but I think that was like pretty much off the top of the head. So I need more info.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Rudy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it depends on the size of the house, number one. How many floors you have. I mean, if you have to go up another floor, that could even be more. The cost is really putting a lot of people out of the market for sprinklers, okay? In a case like myself, I don't know how much they're needed. I cook a lot. And I bet you 4 or 5 times a year my alarm goes off. And I just wouldn't want a sprinkler going off at the same time. I mean, I'm not a big fan of sprinklers for several reasons.
So you cook, but you don't cook well? Is that what you're saying?
I overcook
Oh, okay.
sometimes.
Got it.
And, I read someplace if you undercook, that means you're not cooking with passion. If you overcook, you're cooking with love. So I'm always burning stuff. I love everybody.
Got it.
Mr. Chair.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that sprinklers are activated by heat and not smoke. So you would have to be really burning something to have a sprinkler go off. Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Thank you. So not knowing anything really about this, and certainly 60,000 sounds like it just can't be that much. But B, yeah, that would be super prohibitive, right? So I am. I don't know if this makes me a less passionate cook, but I support sprinklers in general. But if you're not, as you said, increasing the number of bedrooms, and the cost truly is that's astronomical, then that would be something. And again, this is first blush, and I'd like more information. But on my knee jerk reaction is to be supportive.
So I'm gonna call on Ben Frost to come in and give us a little bit of context on this. Ben, could you talk to us about if this is an existing code, and would this require an RSA, or would this require just an update to code or some more flexibility? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben Frost from New Hampshire Housing. And I want to thank Representative Damon for bringing this up. As you probably know, state law relative to the building and fire codes does not allow for the requirement for sprinklers in 1 and 2 family structures. And I can tell you right now, there are discussions ongoing with the building officials and with the state fire marshal's office about extending that to 3 and 4 family structures. So 4 units, provided certain conditions are met, such as independent means of egress for each unit, so external egress, which would require in some cases the construction of those things. What I'm drawing a blank on, stairs, external staircases that are fire rated. So that is something that is going on right now. I think it probably would require a statutory change relative to the building code and possibly also to the fire code. I'm not sure. I'm less familiar with how the fire code is amended than the building code.
So what you're saying is through the legislature, or the code could update to that, because we could have Representative Damon file an LSR as a placeholder and continue discussions with the fire marshal's office and BOA.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, to extend it to 4 units up from 2. Okay.
Yes, both for the building code and the fire code. And I encourage Representative Damon to check with the fire marshal's office and also with Bill McKinney from the state New Hampshire Building Officials Association. He was here at the last meeting.
And I have Bill's contact information. And the fire marshal's office has sent me an email as well, so I'll send over that contact as well. Yes, of course. Representative Damon.
So I just wanted to clarify, and thank you for your input and help. So the building code part of it, separate from fire code, is in RSA, so it would need a legislative address?
The building code is a statute that is primarily by reference. By reference to the International Residential Code, the International Building Code, the IRC and the IBC. And there are amendments to that are expansions or exceptions from the IRC and the IBC. And those do require legislative action. Generally speaking, that is done through the State Building Code Review Board, which makes recommendations for amendments to those codes. And those are often done in a kind of a package bill that embodies all of the amendments that are going forward in any given year.
So is there currently a bill going forward, a package of amendments to the building code?
I can't say because we don't have the LSR filing period hasn't begun yet.
Right.
And it often goes in as a Senate bill because of the later filing period.
And given the task of this committee, there should be nothing stopping us if we see something that we would like to submit separately. I think we're completely within our jurisdiction to do that. So I recommend that you reach out to those groups and let them know. At least let them know, or have them coordinate with you if possible. Representative Yokela.
Thank you. I'm looking at, it looks like RSA 153:5. It says it was amended in 2010 to prohibit the state fire marshal from adopting rules that, quote, require automatic suppressant or sprinkler systems in detached 1 or 2 family residents. So that, right. And so this is one of the things that you might want to, discuss. 153:5. And so theoretically, without even addressing that, the actual code, you could just amend that RSA, I assume, to just extend it. And just FYI, I would also be in favor of 4. That was up to 4. That's what I was thinking. So I think
And
we're all on the
if
same
I-
page.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the other statute is 155A, that's the state building code, and I believe there's an analogous provision in that statute.
Representative Reed.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Frost, as always. So the 4-unit thing, that would be fairly uniform with a number of other, I think, federal regulations and guidelines. Am I correct that there's like and state for that matter? I think that's where we do the, what's the word, excluded or
Restricted,
restricted, thank you, and unrestricted. So that would put that particular segment of the building code in line with all these other this delineating line between 4 units and more is like your true multifamily.
Yes, Representative Reed, I think that's generally true. Though different statutes have different standards, but for example, for site plan review, a planning board's jurisdiction is 3 or more. For workforce housing, the requirement is 5 or more per structure. But for lending purposes, for federal backing, FHA in particular, you can get a conventional single-family mortgage for an owner-occupied 4-unit structure.
Thank you. That's actually really good information for me personally as well. And if I may just add a comment for Representative Damon, I've had success in the past with putting in LSRs as a motivator for the administration. And I'm thinking, because there's 2 different moving pieces to what you're talking about. There's the delineation between 2 units to 4 units, but also if you are converting a single family home. So like on the conservative end, you could say if you're converting a pre-existing single family home and it's not going to be more than 4 units, then there's no requirement for sprinklers. The more aggressive approach would be either converting a single family home regardless of the number of units and anything with 4 units or less. So there's 2, there's a more conservative approach and more aggressive approach. Anyway, just thoughts.
And go ahead, Representative Damon.
I just have one more question for Mr. Frost. Is there any procedure for a homeowner who is trying to do this kind of project currently to get a waiver of the sprinkler requirement?
Yes, I believe there is. I believe the state fire marshal has the authority to grant such waivers. Waivers or variances, I'm not sure what the right terminology is for the fire code.
Mhm.
For the building code, I'm trying to think through this because municipalities can't adopt something that is less restrictive than the state building code in their local building code amendments. And I think that would be construed as being less restrictive. You could pursue a variance, I suppose. And again, I'm a lot less familiar with the building codes than I am with, say, planning and zoning. But I imagine there is a variance process that involves the local Building Code Board of Appeals, which is typically the ZBA, but sometimes is a separate board. Appeals of decisions of which would go to the State Building Code Review Board. Appeals would then go to the Superior Court, then to the Supreme Court. So it's potentially a long process to get relief.
Thank you.
So let me ask you if this was extended to 4 units and the state would not require more sprinklers for up to 4 units, there's no language stopping a municipality from requiring 4. Does that happen often? Where the municipalities' requirements are more stringent than the state's?
Well, right now, Mr. Chairman, sprinklers would be required for 3 and 4 unit structures.
Right. So if this
So-
bill goes through, I guess my question is, would municipalities be like, well, we don't really like that, so we will require 3 and 4 for this town or this city?
No, I don't think so.
They would typically follow the guidance
well,
of this.
The way the statutes are written, municipalities, and there may be a separate statute that addresses this. It's been, 13 years now since we dealt with this. There may be a different statute that addresses municipal capacity, and that may be in RSA 674, which is where, I think it's section 51 or thereabouts, where municipalities can adopt amendments, local amendments to the state building code. But I would check with Mr. McKinney and the state fire marshal on these questions.
Okay, and my other question would be for buildings that have 3 or 4 units, if this were to pass, they would not be required to upkeep those systems moving forward, or would they be required to continue upkeep of them? Because that might also be something that should be added, so that there's no rulemaking against that.
It's probably beyond my portfolio, and I check with the building officials and the fire marshal on that. Mr.
Representative Damon,
Chairman.
that's probably a good question to ask too. Good, okay. All right, anybody else for Mr. Frost? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Damon, do you have anything else? I think this is a good discussion to have.
Not at this time, and I really appreciate the opportunity to process, and I will do my homework and more than likely file an LSR, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Awesome, even if it's just a placeholder and until you get language, we're happy to, entertain
Great.
it at a later date.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Okay, Representative McConkey, do you have an update for us? Good morning.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had conversations with Phil Throwbridge, Manager Land Resource Management Program, on where to fit my proposed change for stone and pipe in. We keep going back and forth, which RSA, if we need to add something new. I'm hoping to wrap that up today.
Okay.
If not, I'm gonna let I'm gonna ask to draft it and then come back to them and say, do they agree or disagree? But all conversations since we left here have been positive with them.
Well, I'm happy to even look at the language. If you send it to the committee, happy to just look at it and not reply all, and we can have a discussion
Okay,
as a committee at some time.
sure, I'll do that. Thank you,
That
Mr.
sounds
Chairman.
good. Okay, anybody else? So I have a LSR or a draft LSR. The committee should have it. There's copies on the table. This kind of goes along with the what we were talking about last week regarding conditional permitting. So the language is within RSA 263 that governs DOT driveway permits. So initially, like Representative Reed alluded to, I wanted to do restricted versus unrestricted for driveway permits, but the idea instead was to use the language that DOT already uses for different unit sizes. So the primary change is in section 2. I'm going to read this. Before any construction or alteration work is commenced, said permit application shall have been reviewed and a construction permit issued by said department within 30 days for abutting properties as defined in RSA 236 and within 45 days for abutting properties as defined in RSA 236. And then on the second page, we're adding a new section that would basically be the crux of it. That would say if the department fails to act within 30 days for abutting properties and within 45 days for abutting properties, the applicant may ask department to issue permit by submitting a written request. And if the applicant has previously agreed to accept communications from the department by electronic means, a request submitted electronically by the applicant shall constitute a written request. So within 14 days of the receipt, the written request of the applicant, the department shall either approve the application in whole or in part and issue the permit, or deny the application, and this is the important part, issue written findings in support of the denial. And then if the department does not issue a permit or written denial within the 14-day period, the applicant shall be deemed to have a permit by default and may proceed with the project as presented in the application. The authorization provided by this subparagraph shall not relieve the applicant of complying with all requirements applicable to the project, including not limited to requirements established in or under this chapter and any chapter relating to applicable affected programs. So upon receipt of a written request from the applicant, the department shall issue written confirmation the applicant has a permit by default pursuant to subparagraph B, which authorizes the applicant to proceed with the project as presented. So this would basically, I think this is a rough draft of the language I'd like to see. I think Representative McConkey kind of indicated that, you know, when this was implemented in another department, it kind of sped the approval of these permitting. So I think that this is a completely reasonable request. So it'd be 30 days and then a written request of 14 days. So that would give them 44 days to approve these permits. So we've seen them go longer, but I think that this at least gives, it keeps the state working the direction it should and approve these permits, or deny it and issue findings of fact in support of the denial. Representative Yokela.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So following your language here, it seems like C is incorrect. It would not be upon receipt of the written request, because the written request is what triggers the 14-day time period. So it should actually probably be a subparagraph under B, and then it would be like upon expiration of the 14 days or something like that, that time period where the, because you're saying that the department shall issue written confirmation that the permit has by default pursuant to subparagraph B. So that only happens after the 14-day period, right? So you would only want to issue that, that they have a permit by default on that 15th day, essentially. And so
I'm happy for edits to this committee if you think it's stronger. I don't mind that at all. I think that like I said, the 30 days and then the additional 14 days is completely enough. And
It's upon receipt of a written request from the applicant.
Representative Reed, you have some, go ahead.
it doesn't say that it was defaulted. The written request is referencing six.
Either I am confused or Representative Yokela, but I thought his point was that C was incorrect because there is no written permit or denial, because that's what you're talking about. But that's not what C is saying. It's saying that if nothing was issued in the 14 days, the applicant can then have put in a written request that the permit was issued by default.
Representative Yokela.
That's not what it says. It says upon receipt of a written request from the applicant, the request is made in Roman 6, where it says a request submitted electronically by the applicant shall constitute a written request.
Okay. So I was,
issue.
so you're interpreting that to be as the definition in paragraph 6, and I was interpreting that to be defined as the rest of that sentence, that the written request referred to requesting in the second line of C, confirmation that the applicant had a permit by default. So maybe there needs to be a slightly clearer language because we're using written request in two different ways in this section. I see where the confusion is now. Thank you.
So I'm okay moving C over to under A. Is that what subparagraph A?
So I think its
Or the B.
placement is fine. It just needs to be clearer that written request here is not the written request in Roman numeral 6, but is upon receipt of a letter asking the department to confirm, instead of using that exact term that's in paragraph Roman numeral 6, that the department will issue the written confirmation that the applicant was given a permit by default. It's the problem of using the word written request in two different ways, where the applicant is requesting two different things in this chapter by written means. And so I don't know if Representative Yokella heard my aha moment.
That makes sense. Two different written requests is one of them. I mean, yeah. Defining written request, constitute a written request, and then if the chairman is meaning that after the 14 days there's an additional written request, then yeah, I think it should be more clear that it's a separate request, a request for issuance of documentation that they have defaulted. That's a different, because it's like just
Different.
having vague language of written request all throughout this
From
is
the original
confusing.
written request of the application of the permit.
Right, exactly.
Two different written requests.
Okay. So I'm honestly okay with, and now that I'm reading this, I don't really like in that paragraph B, it says, which authorizes applicant to proceed with the project as presented in the application. They're already authorized, right? So you would just scratch that, wouldn't you?
I mean,
Go ahead and just turn your mic on.
thank you. I think it's just essentially, yeah, that the applicant wants some documentation that they're able to proceed, so that maybe a building official might be like, their local building official might be able to verify that in some way. I'm not sure that, like, how would the building official know that the 14 days has expired, et cetera, you know what I mean? And so the problem is, I guess, if they're taking 14 days to review the application and they expire that, then we're imagining a situation that they're so behind on stuff that they are not able to complete it within the 14 days, but there's no requirement that they issue this written, confirmation that the applicant has a permit by default. You don't have a time frame for that, so they could take 6 months to do that. And if the local building permit or the local building official is not allowing them proceed until they can prove that they have the permit, then I think we didn't actually solve anything.
Right.
So
Okay. I'm going to call on Ben Frost, give us some background on this, and then we'll continue conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still Ben Frost, still from New Hampshire Housing. And I perfectly understand the question. I'm thinking from a customer service standpoint. Would it not be better to require the department, upon essentially defaulting, to issue a written permit, rather than making the applicant pursue the department for the permit?
I'm okay with that too. I was reading into this. So we could simplify this language and just say after 30 days, there's a permit by default. Is there any reason that legally that the person building the driveway would need to let DOT know they have a permit by default?
No. I think the obligation is of the department
DOT.
to issue the permit so that the property owner can show that to the local building official, to their bank, which may require legal access as well, and anyone else who has an interest in the proposal.
Okay, so one more question. If they're issued a permit by default, DOT does not issue the permit.
I'm saying they should. That should be required of the department. If
They are required within, they shall. So we
So-
need to add language that say they shall issue.
within 5 business days or something like that.
Okay. I'm gonna go represent Baruti and then represent Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if the department does issue it, they might want a disclaimer on there saying that they haven't fully reviewed it, and it was issued by default. I think the department's gonna want something like that.
Representative Reed?
Representative Baruti basically made my point that they can issue a permit based on their findings or issue a permit based on this is default. We were not able in the 14 days to come up with a reason why this shouldn't be given, so we have to give it. It's by default, but it's still a permit.
So that would protect the state as well.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll come up with the language.
Okay. Representative Damon?
So in that paragraph C on the last page, would we take out the initial phrase upon receipt of a written request from an applicant, that they wouldn't have to make a request?
I would scratch completely C.
Oh, just scratch the entire thing?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
I think you could just change upon written request to
The department
within
shall.
5 business days, the department shall issue written findings that the applicant has a permit by default to subparagraph B, right?
That's good. That was the second half to put of what I was going to say, to put a time frame in.
Yeah,
Yep.
within 5 business days of the expiration of.
So,
How
Mr.
many
Chair,
legislators does
Yes.
it take to
I have
build
a
a driveway?
question.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you. My question is, would the public official who's making the decision, would they be able to get an extension beyond the 14-day period?
Not the way this is written.
Right.
They already had 30 days and 45 days.
So 30 days is for smaller unit or divisions, and then 45 days are for larger ones. So the larger ones, they get a little bit more time,
Okay.
but no.
Thank you.
Representative Ockello.
Yeah, so I think that the 30 days and 45 days already gives them plenty of time. And then you're saying, okay, you haven't done what you're supposed to do within the 45 days. Now I'm giving you 15 days to do what you have to do. Otherwise, I get the permit. So we're talking about 45 minimum. Was that 60?
Mhm.
60 days total before issuance of a permit. So.
Representative Brady.
And a department can buy some more time if they ask for some more information, as long as they act. It'll be in process. If they act on something and they ask for more information, I think that'll buy them some more time.
And they're in
You don't see that?
I see it as if they deem that the application is not
Complete?
complete or they need additional information, I read it as they can deny the application and then the application is resubmitted and that triggers the 30 days again.
Obviously, if if they had a reason for denial, then just denying it and making them resubmit would be another way for them to start the clock over. But it says that the language that he's adding these 30 days and 45 days to is that the said permit application shall be reviewed and construction permit issued by the department within. So it's not just the review, but actually issuing the permit within 30 or 45 days. Not just asking for more questions. They could just deny instead of asking for more questions and then say, okay, now you have to submit again. And then we start our 30 days over again,
Well, I think the denial though, they have to provide reasons why they deny
Right.
it.
which which then the applicant can meet and resubmit, I assume.
Well, and on the other hand, they could approve it subject to the applicant coming up with something different. I think that would be better. They would approve it subject to something else.
Yeah, I
coming in.
don't see any reason why that wouldn't be allowed by this.
Yeah, I think that can typically happen with these. Okay, so what I would do is scratch on, I'm looking page 2. I would completely scratch B.
I thought you only had to change the first
Well, I'm
part of
looking B
C.
because that indicates the 14-day period.
Right. I'm
on there.
fine with,
There's no more 14-day period. We've gotten rid of that. We've gone to within 5 days they issue the permit.
So you change the 14 to 5.
so there's no, so if
There's
they don't,
no 14-day.
because
These are
I'm,
important
in my
questions.
opinion, 30 days and 45 days is enough. So
Right.
if you want to give them 45 and 60 days, then the 14-day extension makes sense. But if you're not, then if they haven't issued it within the 30 days or 45 days that we put, then yeah, issuing the
They
the-
shall
by
issue
default,
a conditional permit within 5 days.
well, conditional. I don't know that it should be conditional. What conditions would, if they haven't processed the report, what conditions would they place on it?
So they shall issue the permit.
Yeah, shall issue the permit by default within 5 days of
So you're changing A.
um
So, because within 14 days, so instead you would say if by the end of the 30 or the 45 days,
Right.
neither of the one or two has happened, then B, strike 14 days within 5 business days after the expiration of that application period, they will issue that default permit, right?
Right.
Right.
I like
How
it.
does the committee feel about that?
I'm fine with not having the additional 14 days.
I'm sure the department will come in and ask for something else in there, but I'm okay with right now language.
I mean, getting rid of, we have 2 different written requests that the
It
applicant.
seems a little more. This seems
This is-
complicated. And I want to streamline it.
Right, exactly. There's like 2 extra forms or whatever that an applicant would be filling out in addition to the original application in this language that we are now getting rid of. So now it's just the original application. You say yes or you say no, and if you don't say anything, you automatically give the yes.
Okay.
And you automatically get the yes and get notified of that.
Yes. Without having to have written request of it.
Okay. Okay. Great. So I don't see a reason for the committee to have to meet about this again. I'll just draft that and submit that as an LSR, if that works. So I know this has been quick, but does anyone else have any updates for us? Representative Wallace, do you have anything? Not at this point. Okay. All right. So, Representative Viocella. Oh, please update us.
I was appointed to the housing champion. What is that called?
The speaker's appointed Representative Heller
Yes,
to the Housing Champion Advisory Board, which would
advisory board.
help with rulemaking process for what would designate a municipality as a housing champion. So instead of submitting legislation requiring these things,
Right.
so
I
I'm
don't-
gonna rely on Representative Yokella to guide.
Yeah,
this
I'm
session.
not. So that amendment that I drafted before, as far as adding into statute the requirements that I thought the legislature should add, I'm just going to produce those suggestions to that board, which then frees up Representative Reed to put a bill that says that they are not suggestions if you're a housing champion, but actually just requirements from the state that you do it.
It's called the carrot and the stick.
So I have a question of the committee. How would the committee feel about a statewide, like 10-acre minimum bill? Or
As in a prohibition on anything minimum over 10 acres, but they can still have lower, obviously, because,
can have lower.
yeah. Well, you know where I stand.
Representative Yokella.
My feeling is that we should have learned our lesson from the ADU law that says if you suggest to the municipality that this is the maximum that they can do, then they have a frequency of putting that maximum as their like shooting target. That's what they're going to try and do. And so I'm a little bit, I understand and I sympathize and I would support the bill, but I think that we are possibly incentivizing municipalities to move more with that legislation up from 2 acre to 10 acre, where I think that what we should be doing is incentivizing them to do something more like the DES,
Like soil based.
yeah, the soil-based suggestions from DES. I think we should be moving them towards that and away from these arbitrary, just I pulled this number out of my hat, 1 through 10, just pull it out and that's our minimum acre lot requirement. Like that, I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that it should be based on actual science, and because, going back to what Representative Reed always says, that it's about health and safety, and if and pulling it out of a hat is not health and safety. And so I think it should be based on actual health and
Representative Reed.
safety.
Thank you. I was that kid in school. I know the answer. So Representative Yokela has the benefit of me having run these ideas by him. And I wasn't quite ready to out my plan, but I guess I will. I am considering, and I'm happy for the committee to weigh in on this, and I would hope that if I did put it in, it would come to this committee. Legislation that would explicitly tie zoning ordinances to health and safety as per the, was it Nadine? Like, I don't remember the case name. The Supreme Court, the New Hampshire Supreme Court case that said that zoning ordinances need to be like this, but we don't have it in legislation. And I got language from Mercatus on this because a number of other states have attempted something like this. I think the language they sent me was from North Carolina. And basically, it's just saying that zoning ordinances have to be. In other words, a municipality cannot pass a zoning ordinance that isn't directly tied to the health and safety of the people. And there's some specific examples. For example, it can't be for assessments, it can't, or the increased valuation or whatever. Because I don't like just doing something really mean, I wanted to kind of offer something to the municipalities in exchange for this, and bear with me. There are a couple of you, I think Representative Baruti and Representative DiLorenzo have been around, have been around long enough to remember that I put in twice over a CACR called the Community Rights Amendment that would have enabled towns to pass ordinances for the health, safety, and welfare of their people. And that was specifically targeting a lot of these big corporate projects like USA Springs that came out and bought all of the water out from under, was it Lee or I don't remember what town. And so my thought would be, on the one hand, to enable towns in legislation to pass those types of ordinances that are for the health, safety, and welfare of the people, but then at the same time, in the same legislation, prohibit zoning ordinances that don't have to do with health and safety of the people. So it's a bit of a give and take, and I probably shouldn't have tipped my cards this early and not having it fully baked yet, but that's where I'm going, and I've got some language from a couple of people to give me a starting point.
Okay. Anything else?
I guess.
Representative Yokela.
Representative Reed, I guess I have a couple more thoughts about, kind of on that same line as far as discriminating against homes with small square footage.
Is this a good conversation for you guys to have?
And
offline
and
in the committee?
and there was also some thoughts about RVs and tiny homes being discriminated against.
Right.
Are you thinking about doing anything with those?
So the broad language from Mercatus, I wanted to put in more specifics around type of structure and technology, and that would extend also to what we were talking about with septic technology, that everything has to be, they can't discriminate against any particular type or any particular technology so long as the performance of said thing lives up to the state or federal requirements, whichever is more restrictive. So again, I don't have the language flushed out, but I am looking towards doing, getting the right language to aim in that direction so that there is no discrimination around type of housing so long as it's suitable per state and federal requirements. There's no discrimination against type of technology so long as it does the job correctly. So if I would very much welcome your assistance in helping formulate that language.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that I don't see a reason for us to meet for a while. So I'll keep the committee posted on when our next meeting is, but as of right now, we don't have anything planned. I'll plan on, hopefully everybody will submit an LSR and forward that to the committee so that we can read them and sign off on them. But I would hope that if you submit an LSR for the housing committee, you just flag it for me so I can let the speaker know that it's something that we've discussed in the committee, so he can hopefully send it our way. Representative Damon and Representative Yokela.
So can you just clarify process for me as the newbie led chair? So submit the LSR, make you aware of it, and you send it to the committee. I just want to make sure we're
You
on
can-
board with the 91A.
Yep, you can submit an LSR and then allow co-sponsors to be open to only members of the Special Committee on Housing for a while. And then once that sign off happens, then you can submit it, for senators or other members of the legislature if they choose to. But I think my LSRs will only be open to members of this committee first and allow them the possibility of a sign off, and then we'll continue to the rest of the legislature. So OLS can handle all that if you let them know.
So the OLS would communicate to the members of the housing committee as opposed to the person sponsoring the LSR, me.
You can flag that you've submitted an LSR for the committee and opened it up for co-sponsors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Representative Yokela.
Yeah, I had some kind of question along that same line because I was thinking that generally you're not notified unless you're added as a co-sponsor, and then you're just your choice is to sign off or not on that legislation. So it would be my preference that if you're doing anything for housing, or that you just add me as a co-sponsor, and then I can tell OLS, no, I don't want to be a co-sponsor, or yes, I will sign off, and then you'll know. So
Yes,
then
so-
I get the notification, and so from OLS.
Yeah. Representative Baruti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think whenever anybody files an LSR, that they should notify you, number one, and this person amongst the committee, so we know which ones we want to jump in on.
Representative Reed.
I agree that it'd be good for everybody to notify each other on this committee. I will point out, and I'm not sure if it extends to LSRs yet, but the nifty new tool on the website that the clerk's office and OLS and tech have all come together to do, and it's been in the works for many years, unfortunately, is that you can follow a bill, and hopefully that means you can follow an LSR, so you can sign up and follow the updates on it.
I haven't given that a try, but that's good to know. I'm going to try that for some of mine.
You should also tell your constituents, and this is something I talk about motivating. I put in 4 different times a bill requiring, because the powers that be refused, to allow regular citizens to subscribe by email to our House calendar email. For the longest time, forever, it was only state reps that were doing it. And now, because I put in that bill 4 different times, and it passed the House the first time unanimously, but finally, the pressure gained enough to, the last time I said I'm putting in an LSR, I put in the LSR, and immediately within 30 minutes, it was up and running. So
And as always, I appreciate your passion on not only this issue, but other issues in the legislature. So thank you, Representative Reed. All right, we are all done for the day. Thank you.